Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be talking about the big problem, or problems, with Onslaught inside World of Tanks, which is Wargaming's relatively new competitive game mode. It's a replacement for Ranked, where 7 players come together to be able to climb the leaderboard, to reach the division of their goals, to be able to get big rewards. Sounds exciting, right? But the big problem is that it's become so different to the random queue. It almost feels like you're playing a completely different game. Now, from a competitive sense, Wargaming have had massive issues since the release of World of Tanks of trying to create an end game or to try and create a system for competitive play. Originally, there was even Wargaming League, where fancy teams which had big sponsors, cool names, played against each other at events like the Grand Finals and all the way throughout the year. I had the pleasure of commentating the Grand Finals in Warsaw, I think, in 2015. Ran a little side stage with jingles, which actually ended up becoming quite popular, which was a lot of fun. But I digress. The conclusion is, otherwise this video is going to go on for about an hour, is that Wargaming have tried so hard to make a competitive game in World of Tanks, and I guess they've just decided that they can't make it work at 15 versus 15, so they've decided to make it smaller down at 7 versus 7, which will be more friendly from a stage production. But I also don't really think that the stage production is the main reason as to why Wargaming would be choosing a 7 versus 7. I think it's because it's organizing a team of 7 players would be a lot easier, as well as also it being different and dynamic. But in essence, that is what the biggest problem is in Onslaught, is that it is completely different to the random queue. A lot of you might be looking at this thinking, whoa, what's going on? This looks completely alien. Why did the light tank have an artillery and spot all of the enemy at the beginning of the battle and then drive into an artillery barrage and be able to do 1,750 damage without even firing a single shot? And that is because there are a whole variety of different abilities that dictate where you should really go on the map to be able to claim them, to be able to make use of them. And the most classes that play, I'd say 80% of the players are playing heavy tanks or medium tanks, depending on the map. Usually with 1 or at most 2 light tanks on a team, and if somebody picks a tank destroyer, then sometimes they will be accused of kind of inting in the scenario. Really, tank destroyers, I think, are some of the worst picks on a map like this, because as soon as somebody has a light tank, they're going to be keeping it lit up for most of the battle. So unfortunately we get set on fire, but luckily I'm on my free-to-play account today. I managed to get my free-to-play account to gold, and I got my main account to champion, and that will allow me to be able to get all of the rewards. And as you can see on my free-to-play account, the big difference is that I don't use any premium consumables on this account, which does put you at a tremendous disadvantage. Without that premium consumable, the 10% cruise skill would mean that your tank is 5% worse at pretty much everything, apart from flat things that you can't improve through cruise skills, like top speed, or alternatively the thickness of your armor. That 5% disparity is just absolutely gigantic. So I'm going to drop the nuke there on the low health tank and focus on the IS-7. We take out the 60 TP, hopefully keeping the STP-1 in our team a little bit more. But unfortunately, you'll notice that people don't mismatch in Onslaught. And that is what Wargaming's biggest problem is, that they've added so many modifiers or customizations that now if somebody was to jump into the game, it's completely different. They've improved base accuracy by, I think it's a flat rate of 0.1 or 0.15. So that means that if you had kind of like a 0.4 accuracy, you've gone from being a horrible tank down to 0.3, which is one of the better accuracies in the game. And if you've got a decent accuracy, beginning at kind of like 0.3, well, it's pinpoint and you're hitting all of your shots. And remember, reducing that amount affects the amount that it will bloom when you're moving. And so what has happened is that a lot of players are now picking big old derpy tanks with horrible accuracy because it doesn't matter now. And look at this T100 LT, it's able to snapshot. So the most inaccurate tanks in the game are now accurate, and so it doesn't matter if you pick a big old derpy gun. You can just pinpoint shoot your opponents anyway. Now look, accuracy is still a little bit important, but as soon as you improve the statistic, as soon as you improve one statistic and you make that irrelevant, then you narrow the kinds of tanks that you can play, and you make certain vehicles way more powerful than they should be. One of the best things about World of Tanks, in my humble opinion, is that it isn't about who can snapshot the first shell in. Now, it does come to it a little bit, but it's not the be-all, end-all. But the more that Wargaming remove the RNG, and the more that Wargaming remove the fact that heavy tanks actually have to aim to be able to hit their shots, the more that in turn there isn't really much point of playing your snipey tanks, like a Leopard for example. You never see a Leopard inside this game mode unless somebody's trolling, really. You don't see people playing STRVs outside of certain maps, where it's more about the ability that they pick rather than the accuracy. Whereas, you know, you've seen a few FE405s bombing it around, where their poor accuracy doesn't even really hold the vehicle back anymore. On top of this, Wargaming have increased all of the hit points inside Onslaught to try and make the game last longer. But the real problem with this is that if you play a light tank, increasing the hit points isn't really so meaningful, and now the disparity between a light tank and the heavy tanks has just massively increased, where something like a mouse is packing 4,500 hit points, over double what you would have on a T100 LT, for example, because most T100 LTs probably aren't going to be packing a durability device, because they'll need to have that rate of fire, they'll need to have that view range. And so the importance and the onus on just blanket picking certain pieces of equipment, such as the durability, becomes more important because of the way that the health scaling works. So just to highlight, that was a very nice little juke there to trick the BZ-75 into thinking that we're going up towards the northeast. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, wow, how are you getting unspotted so quickly inside this game mode? And that is because Wargaming have changed the very foundations of the view range mechanics. So inside the random queue, you're spotted for 10 seconds. Inside this game mode, you're spotted for 3 seconds. And that's affected by things like crew skills, it's affected by equipment like a radio, for example. And if you're wondering why I'm not using a radio on my T100 LT, it's because I didn't have the 600,000 credits on this account. And the radio will actually mean that instead of being spotted for 3 seconds, you actually are only spotted for 1 second, which is just absolutely outrageous what you're able to do with that. Now, that is giving an advantage to light tanks, for sure. I don't think it's making light tanks completely overpowered. I think at the end of the day it comes down to the skill of the player playing the light tank that will make the difference. However, it's another element that you have to learn. It's not enough to just be to just jump into Onslaught, and because you know how the mechanics work in the random queue, that they're also going to work in Onslaught as well. You have to learn about this new view range mechanics. You have to learn about the feel that the accuracy is different. You have to get a feel for the huge hit point difference inside the game mode. You have to learn the radio towers. You have to learn the artillery strikes. You have to learn the different cap circles on the map. You have to learn that it's no longer a 15 versus 15 slugfest, and that if you don't jump into the battle immediately and have an impact within the first minute of the game, then usually you're going to snowball down to a loss. Now, look, a lot of people will say, oh, so it's good because you've got an opportunity to do a lot of different things, and that means that it's an opportunity to have a whole new game mode to learn, which stops the game from being stale. But while there's an element of truth in that, the biggest issue is the more different that Wargaming make this game mode, the more that they reduce the number of players who could transition into it. Wargaming want to create an end game, a competitive version of World of Tanks, but they are alienating the very players that they are trying to get to be, well, to jump into the competitive game mode by making it that it's too difficult to be able to nonchalantly play a little bit of Onslaught. It's something that you have to go and invest hundreds, if not thousands of games into before you really have an understanding of the mechanics. And when you do have an understanding of the mechanics, then you can just do some wild things like we've done in this game. With 4 kills, and now 1 more against the BZ-75. But look, I wouldn't consider myself to be the best player in World of Tanks. But what I would consider myself is to be somebody who is willing to learn and has a lot of time to be able to invest inside the game. Just seeing if that BZ-75 is going to juke me. He tried, but he failed. We secure our 5th kill, and we managed to shut down this round with a great result, and thanks to my team for giving me a thumbs up in this battle. This game was a beautiful tilt healer for me. Onslaught is possibly one of the most frustrating, stressful things I think I've ever done inside World of Tanks, but I've come to the strong conclusion. It's not a realization, it's something that I've always known, but you can always try and create excuses, that the only reason why people get frustrated in Onslaught is because they're not getting to where they want to, and the reason why they're not getting to where they want to is because they probably just don't understand the mechanics, or they're just not able to carry their teams, or they're picking wrong tanks. One of the reasons why I spent so long in mid and low silver on my free-to-play account this season is I kept picking the 13105. As soon as I switched to the T100 LT, I could suddenly be able to kite. I was faster than the medium tanks that were hounding me down. I had the better camera rating to be able to make the more cheeky plays, and it was the super easy climb back to gold where I was last season. Now I'm sure that already some people are writing down in the comments down below, oh QB, the reason why I'm not climbing in Onslaught is because of the terrible teams. Well, unfortunately everybody gets the same matchmaking, so thinking about having terrible teams, it might affect a run of games that you have, but it's not the reason. And as soon as people actually accept that, they might be able to start to make steps forwards. But the reason why I think people are not making steps forwards is because they're not even playing the game that they're used to. They're playing a completely different version of World of Tanks that is frankly quite confusing and hard to be able to pick up until you've spent tens, if not hundreds of hours in playing Onslaught. And so for Wargaming to now open up the shop, make it exciting, tell people that they can come and get the Concept 1B, tell people that they can come and get the Kampfpanzer, to try and entice them into playing the game mode. However, what Wargaming aren't really working on is trying to help players into Onslaught and help them with the different mechanics. Or even, they haven't really considered that if you try and create a competitive game mode that is just so different to the random queue and then try and get players to play it, that they're already kind of setting themselves up to fail. What I would really like to see is Wargaming taking the system that they have in place with regards to the ELO, which I think is a very fair way to climb and a very fair way to fall. Make sure that they don't have any anchors inside the game mode, which would create these areas where people are just playing absolutely awfully and frankly deserve to fall. And just let the ELO system work out in a 15 versus 15 slugfest with longer length seasons that aren't just a 6-week event, and to see if people will enjoy playing it as much as the random queue. I don't understand why Wargaming is so hell-bent on trying to create time-limited events where you get a chance to prove yourself to be competitive, rather than just to try and create a competitive version of the random queue, which is what everybody enjoys playing inside World of Tanks. Anyway, I'm now going to focus up on the game that we're going to be playing here, and that is, oh dear, the big old butt of the T100 LT actually prevents me from being able to stop this RHM from pushing me here. Luckily we hit one shell, they come forwards into the bush, they spot me, they take a look to the side, and I'm going to retract the Rheinmetall to try and keep them out in front of the 50B. I'm going to use my plane to spot the CS63, so while I'm fighting the Rheinmetall, I'm actually still locking the CS63 in place. And another thing I didn't mention is that the game is completely different from the proxy spotting. You might be wondering, how did that RHM disappear in front of you so quickly? Well, that's because he's only spotted for 3 seconds. But also, you only spot, you see how much smaller the ring on the minimap is? That they changed the proxy spotting to 25 meters instead of 50, I guess to make the close quarters combat brawling and surprise a little bit different. Again, just another element, there's so many that I forget about, where Wargaming are just changing the game so much that I can't imagine trying to get my head around it if I was a casual player. And while I guess you could argue, oh well, you know, ranked and competitive isn't meant for casual players, so they don't need to be included in the matter. But realistically, all of these kinds of competitive games, they are propped up by having casual players wanting to play them and filling the matchmaker with points. All of you warriors out there who are playing in Iron and Bronze, you are and just keeping on grinding and going for it, you are adding points effectively into the system that allow all of those players who end up in gold and all of the players who end up in champion, that they wouldn't be able to get there without all of the honest grinders who are playing towards the lower ranks. And the issue with that is that I don't feel that Wargaming are considering those casual players. I don't feel like they're considering the new players who want to try and transition from the random queue into Onslaught when they're designing a game mode like this. Now, Wargaming did make an adjustment to the amount of points that you get towards the real low ends, towards Iron, and I believe into to Debutant Bronze as well this season, to inflate the points that were being fed up towards the higher ranks effectively, and to make it easier to possibly be able to climb into bronze or silver within that regard, that you could climb a little bit quicker. However, with still, I think last time I checked, 2,500 people managing to get the champion rank, that's not a lot of people, which will in turn only create 250 legend slots for people to get towards the top. That is a very steep pyramid, right? With only 10% of people able to get legend in the season, and so few people managing to actually climb to champion compared to what it was like in ranked, where ranked the top rank was considered to be gold, right? And I think thousands of people used to be able to get gold inside ranked. But with the new legend system and only about 250, maybe at tops 300 by the end of weekend, at least on the European server, able to get legend. At what point are Wargaming creating content for such a small percentage of the player base? And while you could argue that they are still, at least they've got to try and create that end goal for people to try and grind up and to become a legend inside the game. But whether it's really worth their development, and whether it's going to be useful for that amount of time that developers are spending and the player base is actually going to benefit from it, that's another question altogether. So Onslaught. I will admit that I think I'm having fun in Onslaught now. However, it has been a lot of work and a lot of effort to get good and to get into a position where I figured it out. And now that I have, I easily climbed to champion this season on my main account. And I eventually, when I figured out that playing the 13105 was not nearly as good as playing the T100 LT, I easily climbed on my free-to-play account as well. I think I am enjoying it more than ranked, but the amount of extra time that I had to put in was crazy compared to how I could transition into playing ranked. Ooh, nice reset with 98 base defense points there. These poor heavy tanks, they're trying their best to cap, but they need to go and take the nuke to drop it on me. This player's made a huge mistake, and that was just sitting in the cap circle. They should have gone towards the nuke, taken it, and then have maybe even gone towards the radar and tried to hit me in that scenario. But I digress. Let me get back to what my train of thought was. And that is that I feel like I'm enjoying Onslaught now, but it's been so much work. I still would rather play the random queue, and so it's quite tricky for me to recommend people start playing Onslaught, because I really don't think it's worth the effort. And I think that, as I'm not saying I'm the best player, but I think I can play a game of World of Tanks or two at least occasionally. I'm the kind of player that will eventually be able to figure things out and be able to progress inside it. And I think for a lot of players, Onslaught just isn't worth it. Even with the new reward shop, even with all of the funky tanks like the Kampfpanzer and the Concept that you can get, which still costs like about 15,000 bonds a pop. It's very expensive to be able to get those tanks for the casual players, that I just don't think in good faith that I could ever recommend anyone to invest time into Onslaught, as it's so different to the random queue. It's practically like learning to play a different game altogether. And my feedback to Wargaming would be that your modifiers and the mechanics, you're just further distancing this game mode from the possibility of your player base entering it. And I, for one, would really like to see, after we've had this year of Onslaught, the possibility in the future that Wargaming take what they've learned from it and try and make it back into 15 versus 15 combat, where people can't just pick the best tanks for the best maps and just do the same thing again and again and again. But I'm really interested to hear what you all have to say in the comments down below. Did you try and play Onslaught this season? Was it too different? Could you get into it? Did you get so confused by it that you didn't want to play it? Did you try and climb up to get to a certain level to be able to get one of the tanks? Did you manage it? Did you fail? If you failed, why? Will you try again next season? I really think that this is a hot topic within the community, and with it becoming such a big part of kind of Wargaming's development and being about 4.5 months of the 12 months of content that we have throughout the year, I think we should take Onslaught as a serious concern within the community. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And really looking forward to seeing what you all have to say in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.